gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner sun, we're gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner sun, 2021.
Thank you, Poncho Man. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition. My name is Bob Babbitt. We're brought to you by Challenge North America, by Credo Tri, UCAN, Hoka One One, VeloFix, Normatec, Canyon Bikes, and of course, our Challenge Athletes Foundation. Last week, we sent out 3,038 grants totaling $5.1 million. Keep challenged athletes in the game of life through sport. Our next guest, a guy who lives and breathes sports every single day of his life. He is the ultramarathon man himself, New York Times bestselling author. His new book is called A Runner's High, My Life in Motion, by the always awesome Mr. Dean Karnazes. Dean, how the heck you doing? And I love the Endurance Awards behind you.
I had to put those on display just for you, Bob.
I love that.
Let's start just by congratulating you with all the success with Challenge Athlete Foundation and that most recent accomplishment. I mean, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
Well, you've been there for the whole time, and we started it 27 years ago, and we're over $123 million raised, over 30,000 grants sent out. So it's been pretty special. But what I love about this new book is I feel in this book that you share more about sort of the tough times that maybe we hadn't seen before. Because you and I have chatted. I remember when you were running across the U.S., left Disneyland and were running across the U.S. and you're like one day into this thing and you were a mess because it was like 100-some degrees. But that wasn't public stuff. That was you and I chatting. Did you try to keep sort of the tough part of it a little bit under wraps through the years?
I think so. It's a tough balance, right? You don't want to come off as a complainer because let's face it, I live an idyllic lifestyle, but it is a lot of hard work. And I don't think a lot of people understand what goes into it. People like you and Dave Scott, you guys have carved out this career path out of nothing. And I have such admiration for that, but it's really tricky.
Well, and you have done the same thing, right? You went from a real corporate job to deciding I'm going to make a living as a quote unquote ultra runner. And at the time, ultra runners were considered, we're talking witness protection guys. We're talking people who the only reason people were doing ultra running was to sort of like they're on the lam from something, and nobody really knew. And ultra runners didn't want any publicity. That's the part that always blew me away. When you came in and were creating publicity, were you surprised there was actually a backlash?
Yeah, I was accused of giving away the holy grail of running by exposing the world to ultra running. And so be it. I understand, it is difficult to get into some of the marquee races. That's one of the kind of downsides of the popularity of the sport. Like to get into Western states, I write about this in the book, the odds are slimmer than getting into Harvard. So a lot of the really big marquee events have waiting lists and they have lotteries. But other than that, the sport is still, it's still fairly underground. I mean, you and I are in the industry, so we know about it. But most lay people still don't know that people run 100 miles.
Well, and they might have heard of Western states. They might have heard of Badwater or Leadville. But beyond that, Rocky Raccoon, all these other events don't exist. So when I look at the one event that you have done a ton, done a lot of them a ton, but Western states, and you go back to when you were 31 years old, back in 1994. Was that your first one at Western States?
My first ultra was 1993, and my first Western States 1994. Yeah.
So first time out there, 21 hours, and then you've gone back a dozen times, and you in 2018 you went 27 hours, and but you're talking a gap of 20 some years doing the same event. How have you adapted to that event, and how has that event affected you?
It's funny. I've grown with that event, and that event has grown with me. My first book, I describe Western states pretty intimately, as I do in this most recent book. And to a lot of people, that really influenced them to try this race. So the race has definitely grown up. But as I write in the book, the unique thing about Western states is it's capped at 369 runners. So the race, there's thousands of people that want to run it, but only 369 can, because it goes to a piece of wilderness that doesn't allow organized races, but grandfathered in Western states in 1984, and so the number will never change. So the race now, the lore has kind of outstripped itself, just because it is the Harvard or the Cambridge of ultra running. It's so difficult to get in.
What's fascinating to me is back in the day with Ironman got to a point where the top pros could go make a living somewhere else, right? They go to Nice, they go to Powerman. And so Ironman in 1986 had to come up with prize money, and that changed everything. Do any of these races have prize money?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest purse, I think, is $10,000 for a championship race.
Yeah.
So, I mean, compared to mainstream sports, it's nothing.
Nothing. Right.
No, it's nothing. In fact, even obstacle course racing offers a lot bigger purses than ultra marathoning. And I think that's why a lot of ultra marathoners started doing OCRs, just because the prize money is higher.
What has kept you in it, Dean? I mean, like you said, that first Western States was 94, and then 2018, you're still out there in your mid 50s, going out there, and really, it's not the best way to spend it. I remember Scott Molina telling me once with Ironman, when I asked him, how come you do the short races and don't do Ironman? He said, you ever been there? It's a pretty crappy way to spend the day. When you're talking about a race with 18,000 feet of climbing and 23,000 feet of descending, and you're talking, it could be 100 degrees and it can drop into the 40s and 50s at night. What is the attraction? Is that the attraction?
No, I think that you hit it on the head. I mean, I think it's the spirit of just doing something insane and throwing yourself at it completely, and it taking everything you've got to get to the finish line. So, even running a marathon, I hate to say it's a given, but I'm pretty confident when I start a marathon, I'll get to the finish line. I mean, right. Worst case scenario, everything goes horribly. It might take me 5 hours, which it hasn't before, but it might. But I know I'll reach the finish line. At the start of Western states, there's a lot of question marks.
Yeah. And
inevitably, you learn a lot about yourself. And the more times I do it, especially as I'm getting older, the more I learn about myself and my resilience. And, it's amazing that people are doing the kind of things that I'm doing in our, 50s and late 50s, because you look at mainstream sports, and most retired football players or basketball players, you look at them in their late 50s and you think there's no way they can get back on the court. I mean, there's no way they're going to be that competitive. Where in endurance sports, there's people that are still competitive, at these late ages. So I think we really have a unique group of people that are super fit.
It is fascinating, because I remember when Dave Scott in 1994 came and finished at 40, finished second after being away for 5 years. And everybody's like, oh my God. And then Mark Allen won in 95 and he was 37. But over time, and when we look at the top guys at Ironman now, Jan Frodeno's 40, Timothy O'Donnell is 40, and they're still at the tip of the pyramid. How have you had to adapt to age to be able to still be, competitive, to still feel like, that you have a chance at a lot of these races?
I just show up at the starting line with the same commitment at every race. I'm going to do the best I can. My performances are so inconsistent as I've gotten older. So some days I have a great race. Other days, it's a horrible race, and I can't predict why. I'm not entirely sure why, but I just say to myself, you're going to leave nothing on the course today. You're going to give it your all. And when you cross that finish line, you're going to be entirely spent. And if you have that commitment, the only way you can fail is if you let yourself down. It's funny, I'll enter like a fun run, like a 5K fun run, and I'll pass someone and they'll glance at me and say, oh, they'll look at me, and they kind of give me that look like, oh, I know who this guy is. And they speed up, like they don't want me to pass them. And sometimes these are, people in their 30s or, even 20s.
Yeah.
And I get a kick out of that because, here I am in my late 50s, just trying to get to the finish line.
Well, that's actually the best part. What I love in the sport of triathlon, you have a number on your calf that says your age. The best part is if you go by a couple of people whose ages add up to less than you, right? You're 60 and the two of them are 25 each, and you go by them. That sort of ruins their day. They don't really like that very much. So
I think, the thing with Ironman is that it's a race. I mean, the thing with running 100 miles through the wilderness is kind of an adventure. I mean, Ironman is an adventure, but you don't just go do an Ironman. I mean, you get on a race course and you race Ironman. So it's all about your time and your place. Where I think with ultramarathoning, it's a little less about that. And, if you look at even Western states, most finishers, which I didn't realize because I've never, finished at any time above 24 hours, but most finishers finish in the last hour 29 to 30. Most people come across and reach the finish line. So that really surprised me.
Can you enjoy it as much when you're out there 27 hours rather than being, 21 hours?
I don't think there's any enjoyment in any of it. I don't care who you are. There's a lot of pain and, a lot of suffering, but I think that's our idea of fun, and you can enjoy it, Bob. I mean, a lot of it is, which I hope to capture. I hope I captured in the book. A lot of it is kind of hilarity of, watching your body fall apart and how people respond to you. And then there's sublime moments where, you really have a reckoning with God out there. You might see the full moon through the pine trees, and there's really, supreme feelings of bliss. And then a couple minutes later, you feel like you can't even take another step.
One of the points you've made in the book, one second you're running along and your rhythm is great and you're fluid and smooth. The next minute you're face down on the trail and you don't know where your body parts are. It's part of the attraction of the whole ultra world, just that sort of unknown. This is a journey into the unknown. One, it's a point A to point B, it's 100 miles, but you don't know if your body's going to handle it. You don't know if that food you ate last time you raced it was great. This time is not going to be great. Talk a little bit about when you're doing that, when you're out at Western states, how do you keep it from beating you up?
I think there's a saying, find what you love and let it kill you. And I think, these races do kill us a little bit. They give us life, but they also take a lot out of us. But I think that, at least to me and to people like yourself, we'd rather live a life that's filled with highs and lows versus a life that's just plains along, even keeled. I think we thrive on the highs, and in a way, we get a lot of energy out of the lows. The lows motivate us to try harder.
What are some of your favorite moments from Western states?
Certainly, I write a lot about my mom and dad in this book. It's been a family journey. I mean, Nick and Fran, who Nick, my dad, is quite a character, but they've been along with me on every Western states since day one. Every single one, they've been there. So a lot of, coming out of the wilderness and hitting an aid station and seeing them standing there is so endearing to me. I love the crowd. I love the energy. I just love everything about the race, the people, the camaraderie. It's just, it's like Ironman, Kona. It's just a celebrated event that, brings out the best in the human spirit.
So when you started thinking about running this book, again, A Runner's High, My Life in Motion, Dean Karnazes, what did you want people to come away with from this one? Because you've written Ultramarathon Man, you've done your film, you've pretty much accomplished anything associated with long distance. What did you want people to take away from this?
I wanted it to be good storytelling. I wanted it to be a propulsive book where you pick it up and you just start turning pages and get engaged in the story. Like a good run, when you're in the moment, in the here and now, all your problems kind of disappear. You're just in this state of bliss. And I was hoping to capture kind of those moments in writing form so that someone could just get away from kind of the current situation we're in right now and take a journey somewhere else through someone else's eyes. I think a lot of runners and ultramarathoners and Ironmen, will be nodding their head as they're reading the book, because there's a lot of things that we experience that most people don't.
Yes.
And I think there's some comedy in that. So I also hope the book's kind of enlightening. I mean, I talk about running into the White House. We spoke about my run across America and, getting a call from Michelle Obama as I'm, coming up to Washington, D.C. and, her saying, yeah, will you stop on by? I'd love to meet you. So I talk about
stop on by. Hey, let me give you the address.
never forget running down Pennsylvania Avenue, and there's all the tourists out in front looking, and all of a sudden the gate opens, and there's a special ops guy standing there with this, this bazooka of a rifle, and he's just like, "Hey, Carno, come on in here." And all these people are like looking like, "Who is this guy?" And I just run right into the White House.
That is like the coolest thing. When you're, mentally, when you're doing a 100-miler, you can be looking at, you get to about mile 50 and you can be thinking, "Oh my God, I've got 50 more to do." Or you can be thinking, "Oh my God, I'm halfway done." You're obviously probably the latter, where you're always looking at things as a positive. Do you have to fight that, where you've got the guy on one shoulder saying, "This is stupid. I could be laying in my bed right now. I could have a mint on my pillow." And the other guy go, "No, you need to test yourself and find out where you're at."
I think there's a little of both. I'll never forget the founder of Elliptigo, Brian Pate, who he did Ironman, and he said to me at a point he was so exhausted on both the ride and the run. He's just like, "Will a car please hit me? Please, let me let a car hit me so I can stop and go to the hospital."
Yeah.
And some days you just feel like that. You just feel like, "God, I wish I would just trip and fall and break something so I could stop, because this is so miserable." But, inevitably, if you can make it, it's so much more rewarding.
I always call on different memories that you've shared with me over time and that I've seen from your movies and from the books. And one of the ones that sticks out to me the most is when you were in, I think it was South Dakota, you were running a marathon a day. And a lot of times it would be people coming out to run with you. You get, 20, 30, 40 people. Well, this one day in, I don't know if it was South Dakota, wherever the hell it was, you had one woman who was a breast cancer survivor who was basically half wheeling you the whole run. You thought you were going to have a nice, easy marathon. She's pushing you the whole time.
Yeah, no, I'll never forget her, Amy. She was amazing. It was of all the marathons I ran, that was the only time there was just one other person with me.
Yeah.
And, she was very introverted and didn't talk much, but she was booking it. And finally we got to the midway point and the course kind of turned downward. I'm like, what's the rush? And she said, "Well, I got to get back to work." And I thought, wow, this woman's got a large appetite for life. But then I said, "Well, what's your story? Why are you here?" She said, "Well, I wanted to run my 50th marathon with you." And I said, "That's amazing. This is your 50th marathon." She's like, "Yeah." And I said, "When did you start running?" And she said, "I started running at 50. And I said, "That's incredible. So in 3 years, you run 50 marathons. What got you started?" And she said, "Well, I had terminal breast cancer, and my doctor told me I had 6 months to live." And I looked at him and said, "No, I'm not only going to beat breast cancer, I'm going to become a marathoner." And she did. And she had the best attitude. She had a double mastectomy. And she said to me, "Who needs them anyway? They just slowed me down."
Isn't that funny? Because you get all these people meeting you along the way, and this one you're doing it on your own with one person, and you sort of need her because you sort of need to know where to go, right? She's the local.
It was the Deadwood Mickelson South Dakota Marathon, and you're right, it wasn't very well marked.
Yeah.
So, but I had her. Yeah.
That's great. So what's next? One of the last times we chatted, before the whole world closed down because of COVID, the plan was to run a marathon in every country. We were talking, I think there was 208 or something like that at the time. And the politics and the logistics obviously are way tougher than the running part. Where does that stand?
It was looking really good.
Before COVID.
I got to say, I met, there's another guy that set out to run a marathon in every country of the world, Nick Butter, who's become a good friend of mine. And he's done it, but it took him, I think 600 days or something. It's some incredible amount, but he did it. So I know it can be done, but he's a Brit, and we talked a lot. He kind of helped me out, and he just slipped in quietly to a lot of countries and ran a marathon. And I can't do that. I'm a little more visible target. So I had to go through all the right political channels, and it was coming together. And I know I sound like a broken record because I've been saying this for 6 or 7 years. This thing has been really tough to pull together. And, with COVID now, it's a waiting game. I mean, we got to get this pandemic under control, and who knows how long that's going to take.
for you, Dean? Is there, besides that, is there some other things that you want to accomplish that you haven't done yet?
Oh, there's tons of things I want to accomplish. Yeah. I'm going to give this one away, but there's a trail, a continuous footpath across America. It's called
Really?
the American Discovery Trail. So, I've run across America, as you know,
Yeah.
but most of it was on the road. And I'd love to try to set the, there's no one has ever run it yet. So not the fastest known time, but the first known time to run the American Discovery Trail.
And where does it start?
It starts here in Northern California.
Perfect.
And it ends in Maine. So it goes all the way across the country.
So if somebody does not know your story and happens to see this and say, hey, gosh, a runner's high, my life in motion, Dean Karnazes, I don't know much about this guy, what do you want them to come away with?
This guy loves running. I mean, he's kind of dedicated himself to the sport and craft and lifestyle of running. And, and hopefully that he's a good storyteller. I hope that,
Yes,
you're a wonderful storyteller, Bob, and I learned so much from being around you. People relate to stories, right? And so hopefully someone can, close this book after they're done with it and say, I'm going to go running. That'd make me really happy.
So besides, you've done the Elliptigo challenges, you've done obviously running. Anything? At one point you were talking about, I think, running in a ball across to Catalina or something, or across the ocean. Any other non-running specific things you want to do?
Well, that running ball is called the Hydro Bronc. I ran it. I wanted to do a marathon, but it was just too much. So I ran a 10K in it, but it literally was running on water. I enjoy swimming as well.
I know you were a windsurfer and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, windsurfer, surfer. So the adventures to me are going to continue. I mean, Elliptigo came out with a mountain bike.
Oh.
So that has been really great. And Rebecca Rush puts on a great event, an Everest event. And I was going to run it, run the equivalent of Everest, but I think I'm going to do it on a Elliptigo mountain bike now.
Any winter stuff in your future?
Beyond snowboarding, after running a marathon to the South Pole,
yeah,
had my fill of winter. Yeah,
that was plenty.
But I am supposed to go to Greece to run 10 marathons in 10 days in June, and then I'm supposed to run across Australia in August. So hopefully that'll come together.
Is there Dean, I remember after watching the movie, Ultramarathon Man, where you ran, 50 marathons, 50 days, 50 states, and you were being evaluated throughout that whole time and checking your muscles and checking making sure you're okay. And it was like your body weight hardly changed and it was like no muscle damage. Have you been able to stay injury free, and why do you think you've been able to stay as healthy as you've been?
Yeah, no, I mean, knock on wood, I never had an injury. And I think it has to do with cross training.
Yes.
We talked about the Elliptigo. So I ride the Elliptigo a few days a week. And,
Yep.
And Meb rode an Elliptigo as well before winning both Boston and New York City.
Yes.
So I think the cross training helps. I also do a lot of upper body conditioning. So I have, pretty good muscle strength overall, which I think helps your form. And, and also I've got good biomechanics for running. And that's hereditary. Your biomechanics you inherit. I think there's a saying that says the best thing you can do as a long distance runner is to choose your parents well.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Weight training, or do you mainly just body weight?
I do a little of both these days. So mostly body weight training, but, serious sets of pull-ups. Like I'll do 100 pull-ups a day usually. Push-ups, burpees. I do a lot of burpees. But then I do have some weights as well.
Have your kids, when they looked at the craziness that Dad's been doing for the last few decades, have your kids either gotten into this or gone, there's no way I'll ever run a step?
They've dabbled a little bit. They're not, they don't race competitively, but, my son runs just to stay in shape. And my daughter is definitely a trail runner. We did something called the Jam on Tam. Just last week, which is a run up to the top of Mount Tamalpais. So it's basically from sea level up to 2,600 feet and then straight back down. It's 7 miles, just straight up the mountain and straight down. So we did that together. So she still loves to run trails. We ran the the Sonoma to the Calistoga or the Napa to Sonoma Wine Country Half Marathon.
Yes.
And that was a lot of fun. They serve wine at the aid station starting at mile 8. That was a good one.
At Western States, you did an 18. Will you be doing that again when it's available?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to, I've got 13 buckles now. I'd love to get up to 20 buckles. And, the challenge is that I got to get in like everyone else through the lottery. Right. So it's not, if I could get in for 7 more years, I think I could do it. But it's just, can I overcome those odds and actually get in?
And how about Badwater? Does that still appeal to you?
Yeah, I'm going to go back. Chris Kosman is a dear friend, and you know him as well. And I said, when I turn 60 in a few years, I'm definitely going back. I told my family I'd stop at 10, and I've been faithful to that. But every year, I see the application. It's just, I got to go running, or else I'll sign up.
It's interesting with COVID, the people not being able to race. I almost felt that people, to a certain degree, had been maybe a little spoiled, and I won't do this race this year. I'll wait till next year. I have this gut that every race, once it's announced, is going to be selling out immediately because people are going to be so excited to get back to racing. It's
going to be interesting to see how racing comes back online, especially, Chicago. We talked about Chicago and Boston. How are they going to do the expo, for instance?
Right.
Is there going to be a pre-race expo? And it's definitely not going to be like the experience we had in New York City a couple of years ago.
What's fascinating is I remember talking to Dave McGilvery about Boston specifically, and how we take buses to the start of the race.
Yeah.
And based on COVID rules, where you can't have 50 people on a bus, but would have to have 15, he would have needed, rather than 800 buses, 2,400 buses to get people to the starting line. So that's the part that's going to be interesting. I think we can do trail racing, triathlon. I think those things are set up for being socially distant. It's the mass marathons that are going to be interesting to see if those can come back.
Yeah, and just and the starting corral. I mean, how are they going to work starting corrals? It can't be the way it used to be, because we know how. I mean, we're all bunched in together. I can't see that happening for a couple of years now.
Well, Dean, what I love is you've been the guy, really, when it came to ultra running. You really helped to put ultra running on the map, kicking and screaming. A lot of those guys didn't want you to do that, but what you did was you opened up the outdoors to so many people who had been maybe running the roads a little bit, had never done trail races. You should be really proud of the fact that you've been a huge part of bringing people to the wilderness and finding out what their limits are.
Yeah, I call it the road to trail conversion. And I think once you run on a trail, it's just there's so many advantages over running on the road. So I think it's just a natural progression.
And hopefully we'll see you back at Catalina Marathon one of these days. That we did the Catalina Eco, but I don't know if you've done the regular Catalina that's usually in March.
No, I haven't, and I'd love to go back. My family asked about that race. That was a great affair. I mean, my family asked all the time about it.
Your daughter, being a trail runner, would love that marathon. That maybe we'll set that up for next March. She might like that.
That is a really great event. Yeah, all the way around. Is Catalina open right now? Can you get out there?
You can. I think Mike Wardian went out there and did some running. We were trying to get Mike to actually, it was the week that COVID shut the world down. I think it was like the 11th, 12th of March last year. We were about to go to Catalina, and I wanted Mike to break Buffalo Bill McDermott's course record. And we were all set, all systems go, and then the world shut down. So hopefully next March we'll set that up again and get you out there as well. That'd be really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally on an Uber to SFO to fly to Uzbekistan for the inaugural Tashkent Marathon. I was going to be the official ambassador and host of the Tashkent Marathon, and literally got a call that things were closing down.
Right.
So I know exactly what you guys went through.
What's fascinating to me is, for someone like yourself, really, you make your living off of these events, either being an ambassador, spokesman, etc. How much has this hurt you personally, just this whole COVID, not being able to go to events and represent these events? Yeah,
no, it's been tough, Bob. I have to be honest. Between I think I had every single event canceled that I was supposed to go to last year.
Yeah.
And probably half of the keynote addresses, probably more than that, were canceled. And they became, the ones that still had the events were virtual. So right. I've had to really hustle a lot. Hopefully this book will sell well because, my bread and butter, these events have gone away.
Right. Well, they'll come back, and the book is going to be a bestseller because the last one was a bestseller, and this one is really, I think, more personal. I think it really takes people more deeply inside what makes you tick and what makes you do the things you do.
Well, thank you. I tried to write it from the heart, and again, hopefully people will get motivated and energized by it, and also get absorbed by it.
No question. Dean, thank you so much for always taking time, always being so generous with your time. We love supporting anything that you do, and having you part of our world is always special. The book again, A Runner's High, My Life in Motion, Mr. Dean Karnazes has been our guest. Dean the Dream, thank you so much for joining us on Breakfast with Bob.
Bob. I'll give you a big
There we go. We're hugging away. I like it.
Bro hug. Yeah.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Dean the Dream, you are the best.